Welcome to Stories in Cyber, the ISACA New Jersey podcast. Founded in 1969, ISACA, which at the time stood for the Information Systems Audit and Control Association, has been a global force dedicated to advancing the realms of information governance, risk management, and cybersecurity. Here's the thing, ISACA is more than just a global organization. It's a global community, and we're not just a name. We're a network of like-minded professionals consisting of local chapters with tailored resources that empower individuals and businesses. So whether you're working for Chase Bank in Newark or work at Danske Bank in Denmark, you are not too far from the support and opportunities that ISACA chapters can provide. In this episode, we want to dive into what you can expect from Stories in Cyber and give you a glimpse into our podcast mission. We'll share our goals, introduce to you our fascinating guests, and provide a sneak peek at the topics we'll explore in the episodes to come. So with that said, let's get started.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Stories in Cyber, the cybersecurity podcast for ISACA New Jersey. My name is Yevgeniy Baronvskiy. I'm a host here with the podcast, and a guest on our show today is Susan Prescott. Susan Prescott is a former vulnerability risk management and governance and quality management leader for one of the world's largest telecoms. Hi, Susan.
Hi, Jean. Can I call you Jean?
Yes, sure, absolutely. Can you tell us more about your role and who you are, and introduce yourself to us?
Well, I started in security a very long time ago, a couple of decades ago, before there was any information available, before there was an internet, and before there was even any information available in the library about data security, which is what it was called at the time. I worked in banking, and in that banking, I had about 12 people that we did everything, including disaster recovery and change control. That's how it was back then, and that was a big team, considering it was banking. It was important. That was a big team for the times. And I realized, being in the mainframe security at some point, I had moved to banking, from banking to insurance. I had been in manufacturing before that and did a little bit of cybersecurity as well, data security as a side thing, but that was security by obscurity. In other words, there were menus, and I drove the access by menus. If they had gotten to the command line, they would have had everything if they knew how to use it, but there was no security. But that's what had to be done in order to protect an organization, a manufacturer that was going from no security at all, or no computer system at all, from a manual system to their first implementation of a computer.
Oh, that is so interesting. So I guess with no access to materials to study the subject, it was more hands-on, right? And best practices.
It was hands-on, and then of course the maker of the systems and the applications had some training.
And okay.
So, but they didn't have it in security. They had it in how to use their systems.
Right.
But I quickly realized that some level of security was needed, because there were formulas for making flavors and fragrances, and they were proprietary. And they were all entered into the system for the first time, and the people in the lab would only needed access to what they were working on the day. They didn't need the whole entire file of formulas. So that's what I gave them. I was very young, and the chemist, who was much older than me, was like, I need access to all formulas. And I was like, well, that's not what, it was a small company, the owner told me to do. But if you can reach him, he's not here today, then I'll give you access. But that's not what you need to know.
Right.
We know that's called need to know now. And she wound up, he told me to give her access, and I did. And when it came down to it, she stole all the formulas and started her own company.
Oh no. Okay.
Yeah.
So And
But it
that's
was
a
on his permission.
perfect case of need to know and why.
Right, and that's how I knew I was cut out for security.
Uh-huh.
And then I saw a job application for a security analyst for the bank that I worked at, that where we did everything, and I had a team of 12 eventually, within 6 months actually. I was hiring and training people, and when we did everything, I mean everything. We had, now today when you do access control, I'm sorry, with identity management, it's called now. That
Hmm.
was basically creating user IDs. And then if somebody forgot their password, there was always somebody to answer the phone. Somebody had to be on the phone, always. Now it's done with email. That was amazing to me that that could be done when it first started happening. That was years
Right.
ago too. But I worked in manufacturing, banking, insurance, and then when I went to the telecommunications company, I had a consulting team, and that's where I started vulnerability management. That was pretty early on in the early 2000s. I had a consulting team that did everything, and we sometimes got asked to do vulnerability scanning by request, and that's how it started. And then for some reason, it just resonated with me, and I always got asked to do that. And right till the nearly when I was retiring, I was still doing that. Not still doing it, but I had been asked to do it again, even though I wasn't as interested because I'd done it already, and I like to do a
Hmm.
lot of new things, and there were so many new things. But I got asked to do it again, so I did it again, and
Which
at a different level.
would you happen to remember what those vulnerability scans looked like back then?
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about it? I'm interested personally because working for a proxy provider, sometimes cybersecurity companies approach us for a pool of proxy IPs so that they can kind of test their own infrastructure. Um, and so that subject is a little bit relevant to me, and I'm just curious how that worked back then. What
Well,
maybe what tools you used or
so the tools, I did have to remind myself of what some of those tools were, but we had back at the time QA inspect. It was application level security mostly that I did at first.
okay.
And there was another team that did network security for that early on.
Hmm.
So I'm trying to remember the tools they used. I was mostly doing application security. Are you
Okay.
talking about It sounds like you're talking about network.
So yes, mostly network,
Hmm.
but also companies are just interested to see how their websites will react to brute forcing attempts. Something as simple as that. Um,
That sounds more
and
like pen testing.
yes, and penetration
Yeah,
testing as
I had a
well.
team that did both pen testing and application security. And then I later was on a team that where I did network testing,
Nice.
network,
Okay.
vulnerability
And and
scans.
and, and so that was a while back, and since then, you kept growing into the field. You found it interesting that it was your calling. Um, and where did that take you?
Well, to retirement actually, and I
Nice.
was starting a company, mostly with risk management, business impact analysis. But I don't say that too much anymore because I don't have a lot of momentum on it, and I really, I've created the name of the company and I've registered it, and I bought a computer and uh, created my secure network, but I really haven't started marketing because marketing is not my forte. And I spent a lot of hours on the computer to the point where, I mean, I don't think I looked up from the computer all day long for many, many days on end till it was, I mean, I worked from home a lot, and I would sit on the couch and do my scans, and I did it with just a laptop computer. I didn't have three screens, which was a little harder, but I felt like I started early in the morning because it was international, and I worked all day, and then at the end of the day, I put my computer aside and I went like that on the couch. So I that was my fault. I didn't have balance in my life, and that's why I'm reluctant to start a company, because I need to get up and move more. I didn't move a
Mm-hmm.
lot. I was so stuck to the computer. I had scans running on weekends in other countries that if the scan failed in a large company, that would happen because they moved things around. So the path wasn't always right that I had, because things moved without, they didn't tell me. So if the scan failed and I had to restart it, fix it up and start it, I knew how many hours I had by there Monday morning at 9 o'clock. So it was very intense, and that was before I was so involved in ISACA and the social networking committee. I wasn't doing any of social and networking. I was barely making it to my family's gatherings at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's why I'm reluctant to really get into it again, where I'm so focused. I get too focused.
Gotcha.
I'm the
Well,
opposite of ADHD, too
well,
focused.
happens to the best of us. So from maybe from your experience, and it sounds like you have a lot of it, you can tell us a bit about vulnerability management as a subject. What can you tell us and advise us or teach us when it comes to vulnerability management?
Well, I don't think I have any earth-shattering advice other than it's not just tools. I mean, you have to have the tools. So, but it's technology is one of the three pillars. It's people and process as well, and they all have to work together and and complement each other. If they don't work together, you'll have a lot of vulnerabilities, and you'll be tracking them, and nobody will be closing them.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have the processes to support risk management, you really won't be doing the job that really needs to be done, the whole comprehensive job that needs to be done. The tools are just one little part of it. Running the scans is just one little part of it.
So what are some of the approaches that you have taken during your time uh, working on this?
Well, I always set up teams that there was a person in the line of business that had a focus on security, as well as on my teams, uh, or the team I was on, whichever role I was in, whether I was doing the scanning or whether I was managing, and I've done both. I would have there would be a partnership.
Mm-hmm.
So there would be a security point of contact and a business unit point of contact, and then then they owned the relationship with IT, so that the end user was requesting the changes that needed to be done, the patching or whatever mitigation controls that needed to be in place to close the vulnerability or mitigate the vulnerability. So I wasn't demanding, I got it to the point where I wasn't demanding from IT that they close vulnerabilities, but it came from the business. And that's where risk management comes in, and being able to explain what the risk is and being able to classify the risk in terms of their line of business, in terms of what the products that they have and sell, and what their goals and objectives are. Because if they don't, if you try and tell them to close all vulnerabilities, they're not going to want to spend the money on that. They have to have a reason for it. And
Mm-hmm.
risk management is a big part of vulnerability management. It is a complementary field to, or complementary practice.
Okay.
Risk management and relationship management is part of that.
Um, can you talk about why vulnerabilities are important for organizations to address?
Well, there are different levels of vulnerabilities. There's critical vulnerabilities that can bring your system down if they're exploited. And then there's high vulnerabilities that may or may not be exploitable. And then there's medium and lows. And at one time I ran a scan on a very large system across the world, and I think it had 40,000 vulnerabilities. That's quite a lot, right? But when you looked at how many were critical, it was a smaller footprint. But it's important, because if vulnerabilities are exploited, then, that could be detrimental to the business.
Right, and we've seen cases like that happen over and over again, especially now. Um, uh, I've mentioned the ISACA case study competition on this podcast before, where we explore case studies and incidents that have happened mostly due to hackers exploiting vulnerabilities and taking down companies. And in this case, the topic is the SolarWinds breach
Yep.
and the Orion suite, and how it was used to infiltrate government systems. It's a very interesting case. We're in the middle of the competition now, so okay. So, how would you advise, like, or how does an organization prioritize what to remediate and what to accept?
So an organization, so in a big organization, it's really many lines of business, and how they each do it is different. Some are very risk averse, and others are not necessarily. So that's why when you have a security point of contact and a business point of contact, they're the ones that get together and make the decisions as to what needs to be remediated and how quickly they need to be remediated. And those things that cannot be remediated quickly, you have time frames. So critical, you may want to do those almost immediately. High, you may want to do those within 30 days. Medium, you may want to do those within 60 days. Lows, some people never take care of those. I like to take care of lows because if you take 5 of the lows and put them together, sometimes that causes a higher level vulnerability. So I like to do the lows, and sometimes the lows are the low-hanging fruit, right? You want to do the critical first, and you want to take care of the highs, but if they can do the lows and it's not, they don't have to worry about the system coming down, it's something easy for them to do, that you want to get that done too when you have the time.
Nice. Where do you guys, where does the discovery of vulnerabilities come from? Maybe the top 3 sources. Are you subscribed to some sort of a news network where they discuss vulnerabilities? Do you guys do your own scans and things like that? Well, where does it all
Well,
come from?
most of the tools, the most recent tool I had experience with was Tenable, and
Tenable, okay.
right within the tool. Are you familiar with it?
Actually, I'm not.
Okay,
Yeah.
so right within the tool, you can, when you see the vulnerability, you can connect to the common vulnerability database and
Common.
see and you get CVEs, which are common vulnerability exploits, I believe it is. To check that.
Yep.
It's CVEs.
That sounds right.
Okay. So you get to see that, and you get to use that through the tool. You can go to the website directly too. That's open to everyone. MITRE, I believe, has a hand in that. I'm trying to think of what else. Now they have something I saw recently, which was called KEV. And
Okay.
that is where they tell you which ones are exploitable. And those are the ones that you want to look at first. So the CVEs and KEV. Also for development, for programming, OWASP is another open source thing. OWASP is Open Web Application Security Program or Project. And it used to be called something else. It wasn't web, because it started, as a matter of fact, I found this the other day. This was from 2005. Oh, it looks backwards on the screen, but it's
Oh,
OWASP
nice. No,
Developer's Guide.
it's not backwards. We see it fine. Yeah.
Okay, it's backwards on mine. So I found this the other day. It's old, but it's still relevant. And I looked up, they're on 4 now. So whenever, that's another thing about process. You have to be in the system development lifecycle, or the development lifecycle of product or whatever it is they're developing, to make sure that security or vulnerability management has a hand in it. does some risk management, does some risk assessments, and does some early scanning, pick those vulnerabilities up before you deploy even, beta,
Right.
because there's a lot that can be closed. The problem that I found was at the time, was a lot of the vulnerability scanning was more centralized. So I tried to take a quasi-decentralized approach where, yes, we were the security point of contacts. However, when it came to new development, we would give them a license for the tool to use temporarily. We had enough licenses. That's another thing. You have to do the licensing for the tools. You have to choose the tools and the requirements. But we would give them the licensing temporarily so that they could scan, so that before they even deployed, they would have vulnerability scans. They
Right.
didn't, not to wait till we found out later that, oh, there's something that they deployed 6 months ago and now we have to scan it. That doesn't work. It's too late. So that whole centralized approach, it gives an access of control over, it gives control over the tools for the people that are doing vulnerability scanning. But I really think that those tools need to get in the hands of the developers while they're developing.
And so when it comes to that, I guess you need an open channel of communications to stay on top of these things, right? Can you talk about uh, accountability for remediating vulnerabilities for an organization with a decentralized team um, within, let's say, a large organization?
Okay, so the relationship with the lines of business is a cross-functional collaboration, and then the relationship that is owned by the the point of contact for security is the one with the line of business, and the line of business owns the relationship with IT, because
Hmm.
IT is doing things for them every day. They're keeping
Right.
their systems up. They're doing, upgrades and things like that. So now, if you come in on the side and start asking an administrator to update to do right, and you get so great, they may be not be risk averse at all. So you have to be able to have that dialogue. So we would have monthly meetings. Each of my security point of contacts would have that relationship, have a monthly meeting. They would discuss the reports. They would request, to correct vulnerabilities, aligning it with the budget. The line of business can align it with the budget if there's a cost to it. Whereas we weren't going to pay the administrators to do that. The line of business has to pay them, so they have to be involved. And then if there's risk, they know who should own that risk in their line of business.
Hmm.
They knew who, we may have access to names that change all the time, but they know who the key people are that really should own that risk. And then they can explain the risk to them. You put it in the risk catalog, and then you coach them, and the business people actually sign off on the risk, whether they're
Okay.
accepting it, whether they're mitigating it, whether they're however they're going to handle it, but they sign off on it.
Gotcha. Um, cool. So we're approaching probably the end of our short episode. Before we go, can I ask you maybe to share a story that you have that could be interesting to share with the audience, where perhaps you had an active exploit or anything you can think of that could be interesting to share?
There is a story about inventory. So
Okay.
inventory is key to this, especially in a larger organization, knowing what systems you have, knowing what applications you have. And there were times where the inventory was incorrect, and we would ask the wrong people to fix things, and we had to correct the inventory. So that's where we had to get involved in fixing the inventory problems,
Mhm.
before we could really do a good job with vulnerability management. And people often wonder why security have their hands in the inventory, or why they have their hands in things, but without a good basis, without a
Mhm.
good foundation, which is what the inventory is, without a good foundation, you just cannot do the job as effectively. And go ahead.
And what do you mean by inventory? Are you talking about infrastructure
Right.
or?
What devices do you have? Where are they located? What applications are on them? Who
Mhm.
owns it? Who's the administrator? Who's the engineer? Who's the architect? Who's the developer? What compliance requirements do they have that, and that should all be in an inventory. What do they have to follow? Payment card industry standards? Do they have to follow HIPAA? What is
Mhm.
it that they have to follow? And if you have a really good inventory that's kept, that's maintained, that is the foundation for your program.
From your job experiences, you were doing in-house work, uh, right?
Both internal and external. I was when I had the consulting team, we had about 10% of 90% of our work was internal, and 10% was our big Fortune 500 type companies.
Okay.
And they
Did
were,
you
go ahead.
did you maybe have any interesting incidents that you could speak about? Um,
In terms of incidents, I did not have any. I was a party to where, and this is important, where some of the others, there's more in a big company, a lot of people are doing
mhm.
scanning. A system went down,
Mhm.
and it was an important system.
Mhm.
I won't say which one it was, an important system, and it went down because of the scan. And they bring everybody who does scanning, like kind of trying to a witch hunt. Who did it? Who did it? And I got to be a party to those. Luckily, my teams hadn't done that while they were reporting to me. I don't know if I was lucky or good, but what's the matter? What's the difference?
Right.
But one of the things that if the system came down and you're doing a non-invasive scan, then how fragile is that system,
Right.
right? it's it's not going to stand up to any hacker.
Mhm.
So you have to take that into consideration. It shouldn't come down unless you're doing a credentialed type scan, which, then you're in deeper and doing more things. But a simple scan should not bring a system down.
Right.
And
Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah, but I was always grateful that I wasn't the one in the hot seat.
I bet. Cool. Thank you so much. It was really a pleasure talking to you. I hope we can do this again sometime soon, and share more with our audience. I think we have a lot to talk about. Me personally, I find vulnerability management, in particular, incredibly interesting. I think it's a big topic for the cybersecurity industry in general, and super important. So thank you very much for your time. And to our audience, I hope you guys found this interesting and learned from Susan. Hope you tune in for the next one. We're sure to have very many experienced and interesting guests on the show, and it was great to have you.
Thank you
All
so
right,
much for having me today. Appreciate your time.
my pleasure. Thank you and ciao. All right. Okay.